going to do one word of introduction and then give the microphone over to Mel Scult. As I mentioned, and as we saw in this week's parsha, we begin the parsha with Jacob's span of life coming to a close. And he does several things to acknowledge that and to move, to make his wishes known. So first he tells Joseph what he wants and what he doesn't want. Please do not bury me in Egypt. Very clear. It's really important to tell people what you want, but also what you do not want. And then he talks about having a burial place, and he then instructs his sons to participate in that and tells them exactly where to go and to be buried among his ancestors and his parents and ancestors. Of course, as always, Jacob is not always a perfect vision in this parsha. He also does a little attempted trickery with Joseph's sons, and he gives not so evenly distributed blessings to his sons. But at the same time, this parsha is often lauded as a way, as really the only example we have, at least in Genesis, of a proactive decision to embrace end of life and to acknowledge what it means and what you want, and to bring the people close to you to tell them what it is that you want to tell them. So when Mel approached me about speaking about preparing for the end of life, I was like, this is Kismet or Besheret or whatever version of that that this parsha worked so well as beautiful background in Torah for Mel's Torah. I don't know if Mel needs an introduction, but just in case, I will share, although Mel Scult is not a rabbi, his Reconstructionist congregations in New York help him feel like one. He has a PhD from Judaic Studies from Brandeis, a master's from Harvard, and a Bachelor of Hebrew Letters from JTS, a BA in philosophy from NYU. He spent 37 years teaching at Brooklyn College, trying to convince primarily Orthodox audience how a person could be non-Orthodox and religious at the same time. A battle that I continue on with your blessing, hopefully, Mel. And of course, Mel has devoted his life to reading and thinking about Mordecai Kaplan, and in particular, some of the thinkers and people that have influenced Kaplan or Kaplan has influenced. And Mel is also, are you still the vice president at the Kaplan Center, Mel? Is he still the vice president at the Kaplan Center? Okay, he is the vice president at the Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood. His works have been translated, books have been translated into Hebrew, and travels to Israel regularly, and he lives with his wife, who is his significant theological other, and works hard to keep him alive. And so now we're going to hear from Mel, and thank you for that, Barbara. Thank you for that service. Okay, Mel, we're ready for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. The truth to tell, I'm a little bit ambivalent about speaking in this room, in this place, the house of Mordecai Kaplan. Mordecai Kaplan had a very critical intelligence, and it was his habit when Rabbi Ira Eisenstein would give a sermon that Kaplan afterwards would indicate the ways in which the sermon could be improved. He also did that with Jack Cohen. And so I feel Rabbi Kaplan's spirit, and I hope he would be satisfied with what I have to say. I think when we start with Kaplan, we have to remember that he was the rabbi of growth. Religion for Kaplan was about growth. Growth is more fundamental in a certain sense than civilization. He wanted us to get out of the tiny tub of ourselves, to use the expression from Philip Roth. Everything that is alive grows, both individuals and civilizations and societies. But the question is, where does that leave me? I'm 91. I'm all grown up. I am what I was meant to be. So the question is there still room for growth? And the answer is yes, very, very much. I need to grow to accept my mortality. I'm sorry, I have to tell Barbara, I'm going to die. And I need to accept that. My talk is a morbid talk. I want to warn you, the word morbid comes from the Latin, which means death. So if you want to leave now, I will understand. Better now than in the middle of the talk. There was a time when it was inappropriate to talk about sex in public. We still don't do it in the synagogue, but otherwise it is nothing out of the ordinary. Look how much we hear about Epstein. It makes me sick. Children are dying in Gaza, and we talk and talk and talk about Epstein. Some have called it the Nero effect. Of course, though we talk about sex, but not our private sex lives, which of course are just that, private. The situation is different with death. When I was, people bring it up and always react the same way. Of course, I'm going to die. Well, what's for lunch? And when I told Alan Godfeld, my friend, that I was going to give a talk on death, he said, "Oh, that's nice." But of course, he was kidding. I want to suggest that we go through stages. I remember when I was 11, I couldn't imagine being 25. I would never reach it. When we are young, unless we suffer the loss of a parent or some significant other, we don't think much about death, because deep down we think we are immortal. The next stage comes many years later, when we are in midlife, and we begin to realize that however our lives have developed, this is it, and will be it for now and in the future. We finally realize that we are not going to live forever. This, of course, is a very scary thought, and perhaps one of the primary components of the midlife crisis. Of course, truth to tell, my main point here, there is a part of our minds which will always believe that we are immortal. But more on that in a few minutes. The next stage comes with the 60s or so, when we begin to think about how we are going to die. Will it be by fire or by water? No, that's another sermon. That's a Rosh Hashanah sermon. What we think now is, will it be with a heart attack or something slower and more painful? I hope it is not for me a form of dementia, since I live very, very much in my head rather than my body. I would be upset if I lost my mind. Some of you remember my brother, who came here when I celebrated my 75th birthday. Well, he suffers from a form of dementia called Lewy body disease. He remembers when we used to have wonderful philosophical discussions. It was wonderful, and all of my books are dedicated to my brother. Well, now we talk on a much simpler level, and it is very painful. I should mention the issue of disease. I am just thinking about those who develop a fatal disease. I don't want to go into detail, but you understand how a fatal disease will alter our consciousness in all kinds of significant ways. Now I come to the final stage, which is where I am at the present time. As we advance in years, more and more of those close to us pass away. Friends, maybe a spouse of many years, a brother, a sister, or any kind of loved one. How could they not be here? And where are they? I obviously should say something about the afterlife at this point. Every religion and every culture has an afterlife. Jews too. But it's interesting that the afterlife is not central to Judaism. Many people ask me, do Jews believe in heaven and hell? And without going into detail, the Jewish tradition does have a heaven and hell. And I'm sure our grandparents believed in it. The point of the afterlife is to correct the injustices of this life. And so we invent myths. The virtuous are not always rewarded here, and the evil are not punished as they should be. The point is now, and in the past, people just can't wrap their minds around death, particularly yours and mine. There is a part of our minds that, in the words of the great philosopher George Santayana, will simply not deal with our finitude. I want to make it absolutely clear that I am no more advanced in this consciousness than you are. I'm in the same place. I just realized that there is a problem. There is a problem. If we want to understand death, we need to think about sleep. A long time ago, some very smart person said that sleep is the twin of death. I want to elaborate on that, since we all know sleep quite well. And at this point, I would welcome a night where I slept through the night. Those of you who are young and don't have sleep problems, don't knock it. It is one of the details of everyday life that we take for granted. But I would put money on the fact that sleeping through the night will become a distant memory at some point. So let's talk about sleep. It is quite a familiar process. We lie down and hopefully fall asleep quickly. But you are aware, of course, that you don't know when you drift off. I have tried many times to be aware when I drift off, but it just doesn't happen. There is something about our minds that will not let us be aware when we drift off. The only time we know that we have slept is when we wake up. Now, of course, you are aware that when we are asleep, there is no sense of duration. The only way we know how long we have slept is when we wake up and we look at the clock. But what if we didn't wake up? You would never know how long you were completely unaware. I maintain that this is what it is like to be dead. Of course, I've never been dead, so I really can't be sure. I feel quite certain that there is no heaven and no hell and no God up there who speaks Chinese. I want to say a word about Kaddish. Kaddish is all about praising God. It does not mention death at all. It started out as a praise of God after study. Now we praise God for taking our loved one. Really, really, that is the traditional meaning. It is the rabbi's way of helping us to adjust to the loss. Praise God, the Kaddish says, Yitkadal v'yitkadash, exalted and hallowed be his name. If you believe in God and the God took your loved one, how could you praise him or her? But it is a way of getting us to adjust to the loss. We might say it's Reconstructionist, that it is an acceptance of the world as it is. Whatever is alive must die. Traditionally, you are aware that we are required to recite the Kaddish 3 times a day, every day, at every service for 11 months. The question about the function of the Kaddish is obviously to help us to adjust. We instinctively need to remember it, and the Kaddish does that. The poet Rilke gives us another perspective, another kind of memory. He states in a letter to one who had lost a loved one, you must continue his life inside of yours. Insofar as it was unfinished, make it a task of your mourning to explore what he had expected of you, had hoped for you. This is a very powerful thought and very different. The Kaddish also pulls us into the tradition in many ways. It means making us part of the continued existence of the Jewish people. It means for many a return to the synagogue. There is one last issue I want to bring up, and it has to do with Henrietta Zold, one of my favorite people. The founder, and she was a good friend of Mordechai Kaplan, by the way. She was the founder of Hadassah, who also helped save thousands of children in Youth Aliyah, which she headed. In 1917, her mother died. Henrietta, everybody called her Miss Zold, but I call her Henrietta because I feel I knew her so well. Henrietta never married and lived with her mother to that point. She was 57 at the time that her mother passed away. A male friend offered to say Kaddish for her, thinking, of course, that women could not say Kaddish, which is not the case. There is a dispute in the Talmud about that. Henrietta's letter is famous for her refusing the offer, and it is a strong assertion of the equality of women. And I'd like to read a few sentences from that letter. The Kaddish means to me that the survivor publicly and markedly manifests his wish and intention to assume the relation to the Jewish community which his parent had, and that so that the chain of tradition remains unbroken both from generation to generation, each adding its own link. You can do that for your generation and for your family. I must do it for the generations of my family. My mother had 8 daughters and no son, and never did I hear a word of regret past the lips of either my mother or my father that one of us was not a son. When my father died, my mother would not permit others to take her daughter's place in saying the Kaddish, and so I am sure I am acting in her spirit when I am moved to decline your offer. In other words, thanks, but no thanks. So what's the bottom line? It's a very familiar thought, and we hear it very often, but we never take it seriously. We need to appreciate what we have, all the small pleasures of daily living, the pizza, the ice cream, the friends we value, our significant others, the joy of a new thought. You see what I mean? The advice has been given us to many times, but we just don't take it seriously. The point is, I don't know how to make myself and you take it seriously. And this talk is a small effort in that direction. Perhaps if we remember that as the prayer has it, we will sleep in the dust, we might take the advice more seriously. And then there is a formula we are supposed to say when we awake, which I always say, or almost always, Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Thank you, O Lord, for restoring my soul to me. And of course, that is an old way of saying myself. Myself has been restored. When we awake, we are, in a sense, resurrected. We are a self again. Oh, thank you, we say. Be thankful, because after this life, you simply disappear. I am sure you've not heard that before. You simply disappear. There is nothing, nada. And so the old message becomes more and more powerful. Make hay while the sun shines. And be the best that you are capable of, Kaplan would tell us. Be thankful, be thankful, be thankful. That is the whole message of Judaism and of all religions. And now, because my wife always has the last word, I'm going to call on her to give the last word.
Don't believe that for a minute. Oh, okay. By the way, for any of you that found this a little too depressing, we're getting him to give a part 2 on resurrection. Now, in my generation, the play Our Town by Thornton Wilder was iconic. It was revived a few years ago on Broadway. It's about a woman who dies in childbirth and is permitted to return to life, but only for one day. And she chooses to return on her 12th birthday. In the soliloquy that she gives at the end of the play, it is the end of the day. She has to go back to being dead. She has to say goodbye to life. I'm reading the soliloquy. Mama, just a minute. Let's look at one another. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. I didn't realize all that was going on in life and we never noticed. Take me back, up the hill to my grave, but first, wait. One more look. Goodbye. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners, Mama and Papa. Goodbye to clocks ticking and Mama's sunflowers and food and coffee, new iron dresses and hot baths, and sleeping and waking up. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anyone to realize you. Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute? No. The saints and poets, maybe. I'm ready to go back. I should have known. Human beings understand very little about death, and even less about being alive.
Do we have time?
But yeah, there's no more combs. Should we do? I would say there's time for 2 responses or questions. Okay, I got my 2. You were acted fast and you got it. Hold on, I'll catch you in a second.
Thank you. Mel, I don't know if you remember my father, but, excuse me. Many years ago, he and I had this conversation. I asked him, do you expect after you go to come back in any sense? Do you expect to have a consciousness? What do you expect to happen when you die? And he said, I will no longer exist. There will be nothing. Just boom, over. I can't do that. I'm wondering how you feel about that.
Did you hear him?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, he was confirming. It was just exactly what I'm saying. I think there is nothing, but I can't accept that. I don't live as if there is nothing. I mean, I would value every single day, every single minute, but I mean, the mind in some kind of way just doesn't allow us to accept non-being. I mean, that's the question. Just as when you go to sleep, I fall off and all of a sudden you wake up. You can't, and I think when a person dies, if they die, if they die peacefully, they don't know that they have died, I think.
Thank you, Mel, for your wisdom, as always. Thank you. A little personal history. Many of you may know that when I was 24 years old, I was held hostage for 39 hours at the B'nai B'rith building in Washington, D.C., where I worked. We were held hostage by a band of armed Hanafi Muslim gunmen. I did not think I would live. There were 100 of us in that room, white, black, Christian, Jewish. It was B'nai B'rith after all. We all huddled with each other. We helped each other. Many people were very worried. I was, of course, worried. I searched. There were newspapers. This room was under construction. I searched for a piece of paper where I could leave a message with any pencil. There was none, to say I love you to my fiance. All I could think of was my mother, who had died the year before, and I thought, did my life mean anything? I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to make some good happen in the world. I thought, well, maybe I had, because I had loved my mother, and I had loved my husband-to-be. May he rest in peace. And I've been fortunate enough to find another partner who was so wonderful. In that purpose, in that love, I've continued to live my life hoping that before I die, I will find that peace, knowing I have had that meaning. You have given us so much meaning in your learning. Thank you. Now, we lived at the B'nai B'rith building. Hi there, I'm still here. One of the rabbis, as we were being let out by the police, one of the rabbis, Norman Frimmer, who was there, said, "We cannot go yet. We need to say a blessing." We said, "Shehecheyanu." And I say that for us all, because I believe we need to say that every single day until we can no longer say it. Thank you.
My problem is that we demean that blessing by using it too often. We should use it only. So my message, in a certain sense, is a positive message to be thankful. Shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'giyanu latzman hazeh. That's the point. Thank you.